It was March 21st, 2001, and in Japan, people were waiting in really long lines for the newly released Game Boy Advance. I said, people were waiting in really long lines for the newly released Game Boy Advance. Ah, that's better. Now, I don't remember unboxing or even going out and getting a Game Boy Advance as a kid. Heck, I was barely going to be 6 in April of that year. But nonetheless, I still remember owning one and using it quite often. My favorite game on the system had to be Super Mario Advance, at least for a little while. Before that, and even when I still had the GBA, I still remember playing Super Mario Land 2 as well as Pokemon Gold and Silver. That's enough nostalgia though. Let's get the video started. Welcome to the beta of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Joining me in this video is my good friend BurningChimera.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is BurningChimera. I'm not used to narrating like this, so I'm probably gonna suck at this, but we'll see how this goes.
Alright, well let's get started, shall we? For those unaware, Pokemon Gold and Silver were originally meant to be the last Pokemon games ever made, but after their huge success rate, it was ultimately decided to keep the franchise going, and with the Game Boy Advance hitting the scene in 2001, a new Pokemon game seemed like a good idea, especially when Pokemon Gold and Silver sold a little over 600,000 copies in just their first week alone in the US. On March 7, 2001, the game Pokemon Advance was officially announced at a Nintendo press event in Japan. During this time, once again Pokemon Gold and Silver, and Crystal, were still the main series games, and being played by many fans at that. Not much was shown, but we did however get to see 3 new Pokemon along with the male trainer of the game. Those Pokemon were Luri, Kakurion, and Horoku. Forgive me if I pronounce those wrong.
Luri was the pre-evolved form of Marill that we here in the US know as Azurill. Kakurion was Kecleon, and lastly, Hoiruka was Wailmer. All 3 Pokemon, shown along with the male trainer, aka Brendan, had pretty much no changes from their first appearances to their final ones on the Game Boy Advance. Throughout 2001, Pokemon Advance, as it was known at the time, was the hot topic game for Nintendo and Game Freak. News was spreading all across Japan. Just seeing the designs, fans couldn't contain their hype. In Japan, Pokemon Crystal was still the newest game at the time, but of course that didn't stop magazine publishers from talking about the new games whenever they got new info, even if that information had already been stated by other companies. It wouldn't be until 2002 that more information about the games was publicly shown through magazines and demos. This is when the actual game was starting to be seen, of course, and it finally got the titles of Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire. Some of the few images to surface the web at the time were these images right here, where it showed the player in different parts of the game, and of course the features being added in Ruby and Sapphire. I'm not even joking when I say this, but people were blown away by the fact that you could leave footprints in the sand and see a reflection in the water.
You might think we're joking, but come on, let's be honest here. Does any of this sound more ridiculous than people being amazed at how you could finally sit down in X and Y? It was also during this time that more information from Japan got sent out and we finally got to see what the female trainer of the game would look like, aka Mei. She didn't really have any changes done to her appearance based on what got sent out in magazines and screenshots of the game, but nonetheless, she was still new to the public, and at the time, just like when Chris got put into Pokemon Crystal, people were happy to have a choice of who to play as. Speaking of in-game sprites, let's take a look at more in-game goodness, shall we? Just to get the battle system out of the way, here's what the battle system looked like during the demo still being shown. The only difference is, as you can probably already tell, is the battle HUD being solid green in the demo, and the one in the final game having a more transparent / clear look.
One other thing that changed from the 2 pictures is the lady trainer. Not a major change, but a subtle one. If you can't notice it, then personally I don't blame you. But it's the fact that her arms aren't sticking out like they usually do in the final game. This was clearly something that needed to be changed. Also, dead serious, this trainer class is just called Lady. Like, no joke. Moving on though, we got to see more new Pokemon. This one being Duskull, who, like the original 3 shown in 2001, ends up looking exactly the same in the final game. What did change though, for those who didn't notice right away, were the colors of the gender symbols. Now it seems that in this point in time, they were both still blue, unlike in the final game where they would end up being red for female and blue for male. Duskull wasn't the only new Pokemon shown though. We also got to see Wynaut, Pelipper, Volbeat, and Shroomish. Only 2 things changed from what we can gather on these pictures. The first one, and it may be hard to tell, is the move Surf. It looks slightly different than it does in the final game. The other and more obvious change is Shroomish in the beta. It's standing on both of its legs, whereas in the final game, Shroomish is more or less standing on just one leg. While not the most exciting change, it's still worth mentioning.
While we're still on the topic of Pokemon changes, let's move away from the game itself for a bit and dive right into some concept art. Starting things off is something I thought was pretty interesting when I first saw it. It's like a hybrid between Latios and Blaziken that most people have come to call Blazios. The trainer writing it immediately reminded me of Claire from Johto. However, what I found next was something pretty cool. It's actually a picture by Ken Sugimori, who, as some of you may know, worked on the Pokemon series as an art director and designer. It shows the same basic picture from the concept art, but with the final versions of Latios and Latios. The next concept art designed for a Pokemon is Groudon. This one did, however, have some changes compared to the final game, but it's really only to the body and face of the Pokemon. Overall, it would end up looking the same in the final game and become the Pokemon that we all know and love. And wrapping things up for Pokemon concept art are 2 out of 3 starters, these being Torchic and Trico. Both surprisingly look pretty different when compared to their final release versions.
Alright, let's get back to some more in-game stuff now. Starting things off, we have the Pokédex, which at first glance doesn't seem to have undergone any changes. However, if you look at the numbers where the Pokemon should be, you'll see in the early design it shows question marks, rather than the actual numbers of the Pokemon you haven't seen yet. Alongside that, in the early version, you may also notice that it shows 2 question marks, rather than just the 1 circle question mark that you would see in the final game. The 2 question mark symbol can still be seen in the final game, however, it's only by hacking. You'll see it usually when you encounter some kind of glitch Pokemon. More or less, it's like a placeholder for corrupted data. If you look at this early picture from Mount Coronet, when the player arrives for the first time, it shows both Archie and Maxie. However, Archie is the only one to look any different when it comes to the overworld sprite. It looks like before he had a purple or violet bandana, and wore what almost seemed like a belt of some kind. You guys be the judge. Nonetheless, it seemed kinda interesting.
While on the topic of Team Aqua, there's actually an unused sprite in the game belonging to the team. Who it could have been or what rank this member would have been is unknown. But do you think it's possible that this sprite you saw in Mount Chimney relates to this guy? Maybe Maxie and Archie had different admins before it got changed last minute. Remember those bikes that we enjoyed using to get around the game quicker and through certain parts? Well, it seems that there's an unused animation for some kind of frontwards bunny hop or wheelie that looks like it was fully made into the game, but never used. All the sprites are there, it appears, and my only guess as to why they didn't include it is probably because they didn't want kids trying these tricks and getting hurt. But hey, your guess is as good as mine. Next up is something I tried really hard to find the overworld sprite for, but just couldn't. Here's what Dewford Town was starting to look like in the early versions of Ruby and Sapphire. Now, what does a town have to do with the sprite? Well, the fisherman in the corner went unused, and resembles the one from Gold and Silver. Most websites I got my information from only had this picture available showing Brandon on the dock, but after a bit more research, I was able to find 2 more pictures, where Brandon walks on the sand and May stands in the middle of the town, so that's something, right?
Speaking of sprites, we still have another unused sprite we haven't talked about. This one exists in the final game, but is believed to have been used for testing purposes because of how large the sprite is. It's some kind of big yellow and black character that almost looks like an alien. But, as it turns out, it's actually just a sprite from one of Game Freak's earlier games, called Mendel Palace, which was released on the NES. Since it still exists in the final game, just not by means outside of ROM hacking, and once again, because of its large size, it's more than likely it was just used to test the size sprites can be made into. That about wraps up all the unused sprites, but since we know you guys want to see more, don't worry, there's still a bit more unused or changed content. We couldn't really find a reason as to why this picture looks the way it does, but it's possible that perhaps Route 101 was meant to have raining weather, or Route 101 along with the other nearby areas, since it's so short in the final game. That, or we could be digging too deep into a simple weather test. Moving along in the game is Rustboro City, which at least for the area near the Pokemon Center got slightly changed. On the left is the early design, and on the right is in the final game. From what we can tell, it seems the houses were built slightly different. There weren't as many NPCs, and the area with the tree didn't have a building yet. As for the building on the left, not seen in the final game, it's possible that it's just the Cutter's house, but it got moved since it's in the same area. And lastly, the NPC in the early version is one that we think got changed or went unused.
The top floor of the Pokemon Centers also changed a bit, at least regarding the characters behind the desk did. For the most part, everything else seems the same, with the stairs being either slightly unfinished or just changed for the final game. Ending things off for in-game, we have the contest hall. The contest receptionist herself, it would seem, used to wear some kind of hat in the early game, whereas in the final version, she just looked the same, but with no hat. Alongside that, the desk color went from white to green. Then we have inside the contest hall. This is where most of the changes happened. The floor itself changed design entirely, and alongside that, it would appear that the judge wasn't even made yet for the overworld, only for the contest minigame itself.
And ending off this video, we have some unused music from the game. These would, as it seems, appear to be test tracks used early on during development, since each track came from Gold and Silver. Here's what the Pokemon Communication Center sounds like, again from Generation 2. Now here's Route 38. Next up we have Saffron City, the Gold and Silver remix.
Don't forget about the radio tower takeover.
And lastly, for unused music, we have the Legendary Beast theme, aka Raikou, Entei, and Suicune.
Now, while that does take care of the gold and silver tracks, there are 2 tracks that went unused from Hoenn, mostly about the contest and then Littleroot Town, but the contest has 4 unused variations. Let's take a look at them. This contest variation is an 8-bit one. Now here's a brass variation. And an electric grand piano one. And a marching band variation one. And the very last one is Littleroot Town. It doesn't sound too different, but you'll quickly hear the differences if you remember the original tune. And that about ends this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed the work that we put into it. Now, you might be wondering or saying to yourself, wait a minute, there's more information like the Pokemon Ruby demo from 2002 that showcases the game. How come you don't continue the video? The answer for that is really because I wanted this video not to be as short as possible, but because I wanted it to cover most of the information other people didn't already cover, and that's worth covering. We hope you guys enjoyed this video.
Hey guys, huge shout out to my boy DGN for letting me help out in this video. I don't do a whole lot of narration or anything like that. I'm not very good at it. So if you want to check out my channel, that's totally cool. I don't have anything up at the moment, but hopefully soon I can start doing some streams or maybe some arcade type things. That's kind of what I'm into. I'm into like arcade games, like fighting games, rhythm games, all that fun stuff. So yeah, peace.
Thank you for joining me as well, BurningChimera. This has been DGN, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, bye bye.